So, hello and welcome back as we rejoin Caladri in my slightly unhinged recapping of the events in Lady Night by Tamora Pierce. In the last two chapters, Kel caught up with a big chunk of her refugees. Unfortunately, among the refugees that she was able to rescue, the children weren't there. All of the children, and there's about 200 of them, were sent on with the Nothing Man's henchman, Stedman, on towards where the Nothing Man, Blaze, is waiting for them to turn them into killing machines, which is the thing that Kel wants least in the world. And so that was where we left off after Kel sent a group of her soldiers under the command of her knight friend Merrick, who she really did want to send back anyway because he was injured and pretty much had to be tied to his horse just to get to her, but he did feel it was his duty to come. She sent him back with most of the refugees, keeping the convict squad, which she knows will be very useful to her because they're champion scouts, and a few of the others that refused to go. She also sent back with them whoops, y'all almost fell over because I'm trying to get comfortable and just scooching myself every which way. Most of the animals she also sent back with them because they are such excellent scouts. And that is where we left off. So now we're going to be jumping back in just a moment. But first, how are you guys doing? Everybody doing good? I am doing pretty darn good. I was planning on making myself a cake tonight, but it's still extremely hot and I don't want to turn on the oven because, ew, who wants to turn on the oven when it's hot out? So tomorrow's my birthday. I'm going to be, oh my gosh, I'm going to be 52. I can't believe that I've made it 52 turns around the sun. So I'm not going to make myself a cake. I was going to make an ice cream cake, but I don't want to turn on the oven to bake. So I picked up just some instant chocolate pudding and a pre-made chocolate pie crust. And I'm just going to make a pudding pie because that doesn't require any cooking. It's instant pudding and a pre-made pie crust. Whip up the pudding, put it in the crust, stick it in the fridge, and the next day you throw some whipped cream on it, and it's delicious. I figure that'll make a really good birthday treat. Maybe. I'm also going to attempt to eat a steak tomorrow because I really want a steak. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to chew it with the new teeth, but maybe I will. I'm pretty determined when it comes to something that I really want to eat, so fingers crossed that it works. If nothing else, maybe I could just lick it. That sounded really bad, but it was kind of where my head was. I was like, maybe I could just, smell it and lick it. No, I'm going to try and eat it. I'm going to put it in a meat tenderizer and lemon juice marinade tonight, overnight, and hope that that kind of breaks down some of the tougher meat fibers. And then we'll just have to wait and see what tomorrow brings. So, yay, 52. 52. That seems so young to me now. Me as a teenager would have thought 52 was old, but me now, I'm like, doesn't seem that old, actually. So that's what's going on in my life. I hope you guys are having a wonderful time. I'm kind of hoping that the weather shifts more towards autumn instead of July. I mean, I'm not wishing the cold yet, but I would like it to be a little bit cooler. It doesn't feel like September when it's 85 degrees out, or at least it doesn't seem like September in Michigan. So, anyway, enough of that. It is time for us to jump back in and see what is going on with Kel in chapter 16 of the book Lady Night by Tamora Pierce. This is my recap of chapter 16, which is titled Opportunities. So chapter 16 starts with Kel kind of feeling a little bit relieved. Not entirely relieved, but a little bit, because she's gotten about half of her people back. She goes over again, reiterating that was most of the adults from her refugee camp, and that she had sent most of the cats and dogs, except for she kept Jump, about 10 of the dogs, and about half of the sparrows, and one cat who refused to go. It's a beautiful calico cat who got up onto Dom's horse and would not let anyone move her. And Dom's like, I know better than to argue with a lady. So she did keep the convict squad, and Fonch, who you remember didn't really like Kel all that much when they first met, but definitely likes her a lot better now. She quizzes Fonch a little bit about what Stemmen, who is the Nothing Man's kind of right-hand man, what he's like, because she needs to know what she's going to be facing trying to get these kids back. And Fonch lets her know that he's a big dude. He's like 6'5", 6'7", kind of in his late 40s, early 50s, but very, very fit. One of the convicts says he's more than fit. He just backhanded one person on the road from Haven and crushed his windpipe. So, big dude, very strong. Fonch lets her know that he is just as fast with his great big war axe as Kel is with her glaive, and it's going to be quite the fight. A couple of the other convicts also let her know that even though she's very worried about the kids, that is the one thing that Stemmen would not let any of the soldiers hurt. Like not even slap the little kids. And that's because the Nothing Man, Blaze, wants them unmarked, which doesn't bode well for them. I mean, that seems a little bit scary. Kel is like, well, we're going to fight no matter what. And then quoting, "But what can we do?" Owen asked. "There's 5 of them to 1 of us, just about." Kel smiled. She had wondered when they would remember the odds. "I learned something from Lord Raoul," she said, looking at Dom, who was standing nearby listening as he watched Neil eat. "What lesson would that be?" Dom asked. "Lord Raoul teaches so many useful things." "When the odds are against you, you change the odds," Kel explained. "We don't throw a log down and try to light that for a fire. We whittle it to kindling. And that's how we will treat this Stemmen and his folk. We will whittle them down. But first we have to narrow the distance between us and them." Kel has her group mount up, and they begin trying to close the distance. Now, they also do a little bit of planning, and Kel thinks to herself how much she wishes that she could just send the dogs with weapons, because she knows that with weapons in hand, the older kids at least would probably be able to fight their way free. But she's being a little bit calculating, which is a good thing. She needs to. And thinking he needs to retain enough of the kids that he leads her to the Nothing Man. So she's kind of gambling that she's going to be able to beat them, and enough that she is willing to at least put some of the kids into harm's way so that she can get all the way to where the Nothing Man is, because she knows this is her one chance. If she rescues all of the kids before Stemmen gets to Blaze, then odds are high that Blaze would probably bolt, and she would have to track him down all over again. She also thinks to herself, how on earth is she going to kill off or get rid of enough of Stemmen's soldiers to make it a more fair fight? Because she knows as soon as she starts killing off his soldiers, he's going to know that somebody's following him. And she thinks about it for a little bit, and then she has a little bit of a conversation with Tobe and all of her animals, and they make a plan. It's a pretty good plan, honestly. She's going to, at least in this first night, once they catch up close enough, she wants to take out all of the scouts and at least a couple of the soldiers. And her other plan is to make sure that they do not have a restful night at all. So they get close enough for Kel to see, and she sees that it wouldn't have worked to just send weapons anyway, because each of the soldiers has the children kind of chained, and chained enough to each set of soldiers that if the kids wake up or wiggle too much, it wakes up the soldier. But Kel knows it is time. Quoting again, "It was time." Kel snapped a branch. Humans might think that an animal made that sound, but Jump would know his signal. Furious yowlings split the air, the sound of a cat in combat with a hated enemy. The cat's yowls and the crash of battle in the underbrush were loud even on the bluff. Dom turned to Kel and grinned. All over Stemmen's camp, everyone woke up with the men flailing for weapons. The gray and orange cat, all fur and claws, raced through the camp and back, screeching her rage. Jump and another dog, the brown, black, and white dog, with lungs of leather, chased her here and there amongst the men and the children, baying loudly as they chased this angry cat. One of the soldiers got to his feet, a big double-headed axe in hand. He swung and just missed hacking the cat in half. She raced up his legs and chest before he knew what she was doing, gouging and ripping his flesh. She sank all 4 sets of claws into his scalp before launching herself from his head and off into the dark. The dogs, of course, had vanished the moment the axe had come out. So Kel watches to see how he reacts to this. He lets his people know that it's just animals, everybody can go back to sleep, and Kel admires that he thinks everybody can go back to sleep, especially since he has 5 infants with him. The infants get quite loud and quite cry-y. I don't think cry-y is a word. And it takes a while for everybody to get back to sleep. Kel watches the camp, marking out who's taking care of the babies, where all the horses are picketed, where the sentries are posted. She thinks that Stemmen is making a fairly sloppy camp. He's not taking any care to conceal his people. One of her human scouts come back and says that the 2 people that are watching the road were drinking and playing dice. One of his sentries is napping. Another one has taken his helmet off, and it's just a very, very sloppy camp, which is good for Kel. Now, a couple hours later, they make a ruckus, and that wakes up the babies again. Kel's idea here is that, I was going to say well-rested, unrested soldiers are going to be sloppy, and they're going to be not really like attentive to what's going on around them. So the babies wake up again, and it takes another probably 30 or 40 minutes to get them settled down. When they get the babies barely settled down, Kel signals Tobe, and suddenly all of the horses that the soldiers have are going crazy, trying to get themselves free. And then it's, probably another 20 or 30 minutes to settle them down. Kel feels secure enough that she actually takes a little bit of a nap because they're planning on attacking all of the sentries and scouts at dawn. Dawn comes and Dom wakes her up, and they go off and they take care of the scouts and the sentries, which is actually pretty good, and at the end of it, they discover that they have killed 9 of the soldiers and sentries, which is almost a tenth of Stemmen's force. Kel thinks, not bad. But the other important thing that she wanted to do, and the reason, despite her still having a fear of heights, she climbs a tree close to the camp to watch, she wants to see how Stemmen is going to react when he realizes that 9 of his men are now no longer among the living. And she hopes that he is going to react exactly how she sees him react. He tells everybody to pack up. He's not going to go track down the soldiers that killed his men. He just needs to get these kids to Blaze as soon as he can. She's also hoping that this is probably going to make Stemmen's soldiers even more sloppy, because obviously they know that their commander does not care at all about them. And she's pretty right. The one thing that he does do right, which is not a good thing, is he takes each of his soldiers and makes sure that they are riding double with one of the kids, which is the best shield that he could have to keep Kel from attacking him. He doesn't know that it's Kel behind him, but he probably has already figured out that they are there to rescue the children, not just to kill everybody. One little interchange that I am going to read you that I just kind of found amusing is a little exchange between Kel and Dom and Neil as they are back in pursuit. Their plan is to just pick off whoever they can who won't hurt the kids. Kel does want Tobe to try if they can separate any of the children from the soldiers that are guarding them, to try to maybe call the horses if there's a horse but not a soldier on it, or a child on a horse without a soldier on it. She wants Tobe to try and call them back to her, which would be good. It would rescue a couple of the kids. But this little exchange happens. As they mounted up, Neil handed Kel a slice of bread covered with melted cheese, followed by another. Kel wolfed the food, and she looked at him reproachfully as she ate. She had actually told them no fires, no hot wood, because she didn't want to be seen. "We use dry wood," he said. He knew what she was thinking, that a fire had been risky. No smoke at all. "Smell," mumbled Kel around a mouthful. "The enemy was upwind," Cephas told her. "They'd have to be gods to smell it." "Mother gets so upset when she thinks we lads have been careless," said Dom, as Kel gulped some water. "If I had been your mother, I would have beaten you," she told him. "Bows, everybody. We'll use the road till our forward scout spots the enemy, and after that we take to the woods. It's risky, but we have to chance it. They've got our little ones with all the men. No shooting unless a man dismounts and leaves the children on the horse. Remember the plans that we made. We can do this if we're careful." She had also had to work last night to persuade her companions not to kill Stemmen or all of his men, because he had to lead them to Blaze. So they follow along behind. They keep picking at Stemmen and his men. Unfortunately, Kel spots there are now more storm wings up in the sky, which means that if Stemmen is paying attention, he definitely knows that Kel is still behind them. They are closing the distance, but they aren't quite there. Now, Owen, Gil, one of the convicts, and Faunch actually take out another 9 soldiers that were kind of straying behind. And Dom's like, old Semin must be wetting his breeches. He's down 18. A little bit later, a scout reports that Stemmen's on the move again, and now that he's down even more men, it's sort of a double-edged thing. He's down the men, which is good, that's less fighters, but he's able to move faster because he's down those 18 men, so he's got extra horses. Now, he does mount up several of his captives on their own horses at this point, but they're being led by soldiers, so not cool. Neil asks, what about the sparrows? If they come at the faces of the men, maybe those men will drop the lead reins and Tobe could summon the horses back here to us. Kel smiles and says, I always knew you were clever. Tobe isn't quite sure that he can totally do it, but he's willing to try. And then Faunch and Kel have a little bit of a back and forth about how Kel, back when she was a kid, talking to animals like they could understand you would have made everyone think that you were cracked, but now she's starting to take it for granted. Faunch is like, I don't think I'd want to live in that palace of yours if all of the animals there are this smart. She definitely is afraid that once Kel gets home, she's going to return to find that the horses have decided not to work and the dogs are now running the court of law. Kel grimaces and at least privately admits sometimes she thinks that could actually happen. Then they hear Stemmons roaring and cursing up ahead, and Tobe comes trotting back on Peach Blossom with 3 horses behind him. On those 3 horses are 2 girls in their early teens, 3 boys of about 7 to 9 years old, a toddler, and an infant. Kel is very happy to see them, greets them with a smile and ruffling her hair, but inside she's also a little bit sad because none of them were her special friends. Stemmen still has Louisa, Guido, and Meech, who has been working so hard plucking his poor doll's hair out, leaving her a trail to follow. A little bit after that, she asked Tobe if maybe he could ask Stemmen's horses to slow down because he's actually moving even faster now because he knows he's being pursued. Tobe tries, but he isn't completely sure that he can do it. And so they're moving. Kel is trying to move as fast as she can with her heavily burdened war horses, because if you remember, Kel and all of the knights, at least, are riding in full armor, and that would be exhausting for a horse. Now, they didn't get too far when her advanced scouts, Kel's, come back freaking out at a full-on gallop, and one of her convicts, Gil, lets her know that there is an army right up ahead. They had no idea how the army came up on them, but it is the enemy right up ahead, and they're freaking out. They said that there's at least a couple of companies up there. They've got mages. They're all mounted, well armed. And so Kel and some of her men go forward to get a look at this army. Kel's like, what army? And Gil's like, it's right there. It's right there. Even Neil is like, there's at least 200 men and 5 mages. They look really strong. And the men are all like, oh, this is terrible. This is terrible. Now, Dom does note that this army's banners aren't flapping. And Kel's like, all right, I don't see anything. And then she realizes she's wearing her griffin feathers, which let her see through illusions. She takes it off. She can see the army. She puts it back on. It's just a village. Cal lets everybody know that it is just a illusion. A very good illusion, but it's just an illusion, and Stemmen's getting away. So she gets up. Neil is like, are you crazy? I see they're mages. Cal gives him a look, pulls off her headband made of griffin feathers and sticks it on Neil's head. And he's like, oh, well, that's the best illusion I've ever seen in my life. Dom looks at the griffin feathers and is like, you know, those things are worth their weight in gold. Almost looks like it's worthwhile to go raid a griffin nest. Cal lets him know that that would be a very, very bad idea because raising a baby griffin is a very nasty, messy process. They debate a little bit more as, Cal passes around her griffin band, but Owen wants to know, are you sure it's an illusion? What if it's an illusion that you and Neil say that it's an illusion? This could all be fake. How do we know that any of this is real? And Kel gets up and she's like, I don't feel like going to each and every person here and jamming this thing on your face. You're going to have to take my word for it. Well, we pick our noses. Our quarry is getting away, and we still have a village to worry about getting through. They talk about the village, and Neil lets them know that, okay, with the griffin feathers, he can see the village. It's a very good illusion. And they all realize that the animals didn't see the illusion army, so Kel sends all of the animals to see if there are people in the village. The dogs and cats come back, and Jump lets Kel know that there are people in the village, but not an army, just some people. And that seems a little bit weird because all of the villagers are hiding. And they're not hiding from Kel's group because they haven't seen Kel's group yet. Evidently, the village, which is right here at the foot of this castle that seems to be Stemmen's goal, it seems like the villagers aren't all that fond of Blaise, who we're assuming is up in that castle. Kel decides that they are going to push their mounts a little bit and breathes a prayer to the goddess, who is the patron of horses, just like Mithros is the patron of dogs, and they ride along. Right as they're almost to the village, the sparrows and the dogs come running back, utterly terrified. Kel is like, ha 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 ha, I know what's coming. She says, and quoting, Dom, you remember the last time we saw the birds this upset? I do, he told her. Boys, let's have the special ropes out. The men of his squad turned pale and moved the coils of ropes that they were carrying from the backs of their saddles to the front. We took a page from your book, Ropes with a Chain Core. Oh, look, Mother, company for supper. And there's 3 of the killing machines that they are going to have to fight before they even get to the village, which is not even to the castle that they are headed to. Now, the dogs and the sparrows all fan out. Now that they know that Kel is fighting, they are going to fight as well. The third device, Kel notices, is a little bit like its movements are very off-kilter, and she wonders if it's new, or maybe if the child spirit that powers it, is like maybe resisting. Not that she can do much other than release them from the killing device once they've been entrapped in it, but it's the only thing that she can do. They take out the killing devices. It is quite the fight, but Kel has learned how to fight them. She starts with one of her special arrows, the really heavy-duty ones. She takes out the killing device that she noticed was moving erratically. She and Faunch then take out another one, while Dom and his squad take out the third with their special ropes, and Dom with his axe to finish it off. Well, they finish that up. Tobe lets Kel know that they've got visitors. From the trees on either side of the road came the missing villagers. Men and women armed with scythes, axes, flails, spears with knives strapped to them as blades, whips, and even a few clumsily made bows. And Kel's like, more delay. Great. Kel has Gil go with a scout to see where Stemmen is at and where it's going. Owen grouses that why can't we fight real warriors instead of these ragtag rabbly villagers and machines? And Kel blesses the fact that not only does she know how to speak Yamini, but she also knows how to speak in Skarnan. She lets the people know we don't want trouble, that they're just trying to catch up with the people that just went through your village. And again, this is going to be a slightly longer quote. A girl of no more than 6 or 7 years trotted out of a clump of bushes to stand in the center of the road. She clutched a floppy rag doll to her chest. Kel thought of Meech and twisted her ring of bright red yarn, wanting to scream with impatience. Her problems were ahead, not behind. If she had been alone, she might have run, but she didn't want farmers who knew this area coming after her and her people. The child stared up at her and smiled. She had vivid dark green eyes rimmed with long lashes as brown as her waving mass of hair. Her smile was full of innocent goodwill, and when she grinned, she revealed a missing front tooth. After looking at Kel for a moment, she faced the villagers. "That's the one, all right," the girl said. "I told you she would come, the protector of the small. And she's got her knowing animals, the healer and the horse boy, the armed men and the marked men, the trapper and the bitter mother. They're all here. Place will fall." So evidently, this village has a child seer, which, do you ever think about the fact that usually when they make like a seer character in books or movies, it's either a small girl or an old lady. Like you almost never see a character who is a seer being like a big buff dude or a girl in middle years instead of very young or very old, unless they're crazy. And I think that's because, and I think this goes way back to like ancient Greece, that it's always been said that those who are very young, very old, or mad are the closest to the divine and end up being seers, which this is who it is. One of the villagers is like, "This is our seer. She prophesies that you were coming to save us from the Gallon. I hope you were worth the wait." Kel is like, "Look, I have no desire to wait. Every moment that I am here means that Stemmen is getting closer to that castle. If you don't mind, why don't you all just run along home and let me do what I came here to do?" The little girl's like, no, you have to come with us because they're closing the gates and Blaze has your children. Kel doesn't want to hear that. She goes up and they try to scout out the castle first. The castle itself was not particularly big. The river flowed along its east side, a brisk, deep obstacle. On the north side, a sheer stone cliff soared hundreds of yards into the air. The north and east walls, then, were well defended, and the west and south walls might be climbed in the dark, if the guards were distracted. And if the mage inside had set no further illusions or killing devices to protect the place, Kel didn't like to calculate with so many ifs to consider. Kel also notices that along one of the walls is a line of cages that are filled with decomposing corpses. None of them are children's corpses, but there are at least 24 decomposing adult corpses hanging along the walls. She goes back to her force, the villagers still there, and the little girl's like, "Come with us, we'll help you." And Kel's like, "When will you help me? How will you help me?" The man who had spoken along with the child seer is like, "We know a way in, and we can't do it now because it's well guarded, and we have to go at night because the way is right under the walls. Unless, of course, you have a mage with you that can hide everybody. We're not killing our own so that you guys can do a brave charge." Kel leaned forward, clutching her saddle horn in an effort to be patient. "You don't understand," she told them. "They have nearly 200 of our children, and I want them back, all of them. How many will he be able to slaughter between now and dark?" "None," said a hollow-eyed woman. She wiped her mouth on a grimy sleeve. "Right now, he's arranging for them to have baths and to have their hair combed and curled. He's showing them rooms full of toys and beds with clean sheets and silken comforters. Later, they'll eat food the likes of which they've only dreamed." "He'll talk to them and tell them that they're safe," said a lank-haired man. "He'll make Stemmen apologize on bended knee for scaring them. They'll play games tonight and tomorrow. They'll have kittens and puppies and more baths. They'll get balm put on their chapped little hands to make them as smooth as a lady's. He won't pick his first for a couple of days, and then only if he's in a hurry." Neil demands to know how they know all of this, and one of the women says that her daughter used to work in the castle until he found out that the woman's daughter had been smuggling poppy in to make it easier on the ones that he had chosen to go into the killing machines. The woman is like, "Yeah, she's hanging on the walls out there." Several more of the villagers are like, "Yep, I got a relative up there on the wall too. There's my grandson, there's my daughter." And Owen's like, "Wait, but you guys still work for him? Why?" And the villagers are like, "Because if we don't, he'll kill us outright. He says that if we don't till his fields and tend to his castle, he'll just kill us." Neil doesn't understand and wants to know why he doesn't need any of the stuff that you said that he's giving these kids for his death magic. And one of the men says he doesn't do it because he needs it for his magic. He just treats them real good before he kills them because he likes it. The little girl seer speaks up again. "He could use any ghost for his magic. As long as the king in Hamarkang gets his evil creatures, he doesn't care who Blyce uses or how he uses them." And I mean, yeah, it sounds like this guy is just an utter psychopath. So this is where we do the decision. The villagers are like, "Are you in, or are you just gonna stand out here and then try to make some grand charge and probably all get killed? Are you the protector of the small who has been prophesized or not?" So everybody's looking at Cal, and we are going to read the final paragraph of this chapter to finish it off. "You're sure he isn't killing them right now?" said Kel to the child seer. The seer closed her eyes, and when she spoke, it was in a thin, whispering voice that Kel knew. He welcomes them as his own, the Chamber of Ordeal said. Everyone around her made the sign against evil on their chest. He says they are safe now. They are to have sweets, hot baths, a feast, and easy dreams. He makes his dogs Stenman grovel for them. It is your time, Caladri of Middelin, protector of the small. The child staggered as the chamber released her. The man swept her up in his arms and walked down the road heading for the village, and Kel followed weary. Neil stopped her with a hand on her arm. Kel, who was that? He wanted to know. Kel turned. All of her people stared. She sighed. It was the Chamber of the Ordeal, she said. It sent me here. Sort of. One of the convicts brightened. Then we're to succeed? It's been foretold. One of the village women had stayed within earshot and faced them with a smile. Ernai, the seer. She says that your chances are 1 in 2. Since that's better than our chances, we'll just pray for you. And that is where the chapter ends. So I found out something very interesting that I did not pick up on in any of my readings of this, and I guess kind of makes sense. This last book in the Protector of the Small series was probably going to have a slightly different ending. I mean, Kel was always going to face some sort of a great trial, but this, from the attack on Haven on, was actually written right after the terrorist attacks in New York on 9/11. So that was interesting, and I'm kind of trying to see, because Tamora Pierce writes that a lot of the last half of this book was deeply colored by her trying to process her own trauma of, witnessing that day. I don't think she was in New York or anything like that, but it was a deeply traumatic event. I think pretty much anybody who was probably able to remember, so from maybe 10 or 11 years old on, probably still remembers where they were that day. I was at the dentist. But yeah, it was a very interesting thing that I found out about, that Tamora Pierce was actually writing this following the terrorist attacks in New York. So that was my interesting little factoid of the day. I kind of wonder what would have been different if that hadn't happened. I think a lot of it would have shaped itself the same, but it's interesting how real world events color books. Now it just kind of makes me want to find out what other authors wrote around that same time and just see how they process their feelings. I mean, and it doesn't have to be like a factual news report, but it's interesting to see stuff like that and how it colors your outlook on things. Interesting. I don't know if any of that made sense, but hopefully it did. Anyway, we only have like 3 chapters of this book left, so it's kind of exciting. Obviously, we are now at the castle, and thankfully, as the Child Seer and the Chamber of Ordeal have said, Kel at least has a little bit of time, because he's not just getting the kids and killing them to use to fuel his killing devices. No, this is a sicko who wants them to be happy and well fed, and it probably makes them all that more terrified when he then sacrifices them. Yeah, we need to get rid of this guy because he's terrible. Anyway, Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope that you enjoyed that, and we are so close to being done with this book. Then we're going to have to pick a public domain book. Once I have the short list of public domain books that I am willing to read out loud, copyright free, I'll put up a list on my community tab and we can vote to see which one we go for first. So thank you for listening. Please do hit the thumbs up on your way out. It really does make me smile, and I will see you guys next time.